Then There's California, a podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus in conversation about their lives, legislative priorities, opinions, and perspectives that help make California exceptional. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. As we speak, and probably as you hear this, we are in the home stretch of the last few weeks of the 2023-2024 legislative session at the state capitol. When legislators returned to Sacramento in early August from their summer recess, they had more than 1,000 bills still in legislative play, awaiting clearance out of policy and fiscal committees, full House votes in both the Senate and the Assembly. It's a tense time for lawmakers and policy advocates since this is the last year of a two-year session, and thus it is also an especially fraught sequence of weeks, days, and hours for legislators who are termed out this year. We're closing the book on their sometimes lengthy and storied legislative careers and leaving office this fall. It's legacy time or bust, you could say, for those sunsetting lawmakers who no longer have the luxury of returning to the Capitol in January to pick up where they left off. And I suspect that creates anxiousness for even those electeds who have served several years in office, and though this isn't their first end-of-session rodeo by any means, they want their significant public policy priorities and their earnest work on them to be worth the effort to make it out of the minefield and become not only part of history, but part of California's sustaining formal record of law. How much you want to bet that that's the mindset and the game plan of our guest on this episode of Then There's California, a seasoned, learned elected official who has spent at least 25 years in public service on both the local and state legislative level, who over the years has prolifically authored more than 100 bills that have been signed into law, and whose policy expertise has spanned many topics, from improving public education and the environment to data privacy and protecting seniors, being a true leader on wildfire safety and prevention legislation, helping small businesses and working families. Senator Bill Dodd represents the 3rd Senate District in Northern California, including Napa, Solano, Sonoma, and Yolo counties. He is the longtime chair of the Senate Committee on Governmental Organization. And before being elected to the Senate, of course, Senator Dodd served in the State Assembly and was for 15 years prior to that a member of the Napa County Board of Supervisors. And he has called his beautiful Northern California district his home base all of his life. He's a father and a grandfather with a growing brood of grandchildren. We have had Senator Dodd with us many times on this podcast. Senator Dodd, alas, is leaving the legislature for good this fall. It is the last few weeks of session, but he has pulled away from the process for a bit just to share a final podcast conversation with us here. Welcome back, Senator Dodd.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be with you. It's always fun to do these.
It's always fun to do these. How you been, by the way?
I've been great. Really great, really working hard. We had a month off, and so got a little R&R, so we're up to the last 4 weeks here.
Yes, we are. Oh, my gosh.
And, it's they go by fast.
You're obviously still doing real-time work on your 2024 legislation, your bill package, negotiations, amendments, not taking anything for granted, obviously, on any of that, but you have more ledge memories behind you than agenda in front of you, you could say. Are you singularly focused? Are you reflective of your time already? Are you already saying August 31st, it's peace out, Sacramento?
All the above. All of the above. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
This is it's a time. I've been so fortunate to be able to have most of my staff with me.
Yes.
For 10 years. The 2 years I was in the Assembly
Yes.
and the 8 years.
The turnover in your office is a huge compliment.
Zero.
It's zero.
I mean,
Yeah.
When you have great staff that know me very, very well, know what I want to get done, we work so well together. And we've got 3 or 4 bills that we're working through details on. We can do that. We feel very confident we're going to get there on all those bills. And we're working on perhaps some amendments to make some other bills that might be, not so good for business or not so good for the long-term budget for the state of California, to try to amend some of those, get some of those bills amended so that we can support them. What we're not trying to do is kill bills.
Right.
What we want to do is get them bills amended so that they're better for the people of the state of California and the people that we serve.
You've apparently had some traditional luck on that because you have had 115 bills at last count, and like a taxi driver's meter, I'm sure it's ticking even more as we go along, signed by various governors over the years. You could write your own primer on how a bill becomes law, courtesy of Senator Bill Dodd. So walk us through this a little bit. A lawmaker introduces bills. Many are likely a vital issue or answering a constituent need or addressing a chronic state or district problem, all ideally and altruistically worthy of becoming law. But A lot of them are amended into these bill creatures that look nothing like they were when they first came out of Ledge Council. They can die in committee. They can die on the suspense file and appropriations, not get out of the House. If they get to the governor, they can be vetoed. Kind of like salmon swimming upstream, only the strong survive. So it's a deer in the headlight moment for a lot of freshman lawmakers, but you've seen it, you've been through it. What's your legislative process like? How do you deal with this every year? Your secret sauce, shall we say?
So when I ran, I took a look. I had this early when I had just a few grandchildren. I've got 13 today. And it was really important to me and it sounds trite when people say this, but I'm not running for anything, but I'm serious. I ran to try to make California better for everybody, but in particular, the next generation or two. That's what I was looking at. I was looking at through the lens of how do we make public education better for everybody's grandchildren, for heaven's sakes? It's so important. And I'm afraid that we haven't met the mark there yet. I am hopeful, as what we've done with leadership in the Assembly and the Senate and the governor's leadership, we're spending more per pupil than we ever have before. And when I first got here, we were like 49th or 48th perhaps even out of 50 states in terms of per pupil spending.
True.
It was terrible. And we just totally disinvested in the past in our education system. Today, I'm very proud to say that I think it's in the top 20. We're still the 5th largest economy in the world. I think we can do better, but I'm satisfied that we're moving the needle in the right way. And under this governor and our leadership in both houses, I see that getting better. All budget stuff notwithstanding.
Right.
But we're finding a way. We held education safe this year from any cuts, and I was very pleased with how we were doing that. So, back to the ranch, what do we do? And so I want to make for education not only K through 12, but also our community colleges, our state colleges, our universities. We've disinvested in that as well. Tuition costs, that was a big complaint when I got here in 2014. And today we've had many, many years where we've not had any increases in tuition at the UC and CSU. And in fact, we've created a tuition-free community college system in many ways here and in many campuses throughout the state of California. So I normally just get together with my staff when ideas come in and we filter those ideas through. They know what I want. I've been very fortunate that I've had my first bill that didn't pass on the floor this year in my 10th year. Never had lost a bill on the floor.
Wow.
This year was the first I pulled a bill. And I still don't think I've lost a bill in committee. And I may have decided not to run a bill. And I've had very few vetoed by the governor. I've had my share, but very, very few. And I think that reflects a willingness to compromise, because when we get an idea, we work with the sponsors and we bring a bill forward, that is a first draft of what we think a good policy for the state of California. But then what you have to do is you have to listen to other people, because other people have a stake. We have a lot of stakeholders in this state, and they're not shy about telling you what they like about your bill or what they hate about your bill, or if you could change this, we could be supportive. And I'm just one that think it's very, very important to listen and very important not to fall in love with your bill, and you can make it better by bringing people together. So at the end, I've had some bills where we would have opposition totally out the committee hearing door and around the corner. Then, to find by the time the bill came up in the House, there was no opposition.
And I assume there's a lot of freshman lawmakers who would ignore that process at their own peril. Have you had freshman lawmakers watch you, and do you serve as a mentor to some of them in the sense of, here's how you do it, guys? It's not just my advice, it's my success.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And I'm very humble, about it. We're going to be, I don't know what it's going to be, but my bill package and could be 125, 128, somewhere, in that range, assuming the governor signs all those bills, which I think he will. And again, it's not about me. It's about my team being willing to work with the opposition. It's about the whole process and embracing the process. Democrats, we seem to have great deference. We really respect each other. And I respect people on both sides of the aisle, but nevertheless, it works. It's a process that we're not going to be changing anytime soon. But I'd like to see people really get into their bills and work them a little bit harder for the good of the institution we serve.
Obviously, you've taken over your career a more moderate approach to legislating that's obviously served you well. I assume your constituents appreciate that too, even some that may be more progressive or left of you.
Exactly. And I get that, there are some that say, hey, I really like so much of what you're doing. There are a few things that I might not like if they're, more progressive, but nevertheless, I do have a progressive record as well. There are areas which I think is really critically important. Climate change is, if people with these weather patterns we've had, if people don't understand the importance of trying to find solutions to climate change, they're missing the boat. We've seen the weather patterns. It's not just California. It's all over the United States of America. It's all over the world. And we just have to bring solutions to those problems. I really believe that I try not to pick winners and losers because I think the policy is more important. And very rarely do I get in and try to demonize any industries or demonize people, because it's just like with the oil companies. I think so often the environmental communities let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And in many, many cases, we have enjoyed the fossil fuel revolution from the 1920s or when that started and all that entailed. We didn't realize what we were doing to our environment. And certainly there is going to be another transition, and what we're doing in the state of California to enhance that transition is incredibly important. But at the same time, we have to provide a framework for what it looks like, the transition away from fossil fuels, for example. And we can't do it too soon, or what we do is the gas prices could be, they could go up. We're the highest gas prices in the country. I can accept that. Based on what we've done, I can accept that. But you start, the people that have got money can go and buy electric cars all day long. And if we go too quickly in this transition and lose one of these refineries in the Bay Area, now all of a sudden you've got gas at $7, $8, $10 a gallon. And who does that hurt? The very people that we try to help around here. Those low-income people that can't get a job in their own hometown. They've got to drive into more populated areas or industrial areas to get to work. So they're the ones that are on the road. They're driving 100 miles a day, and it disproportionately disadvantages poor people. And so I just think we need to keep our eye on the ball. This isn't about favoring oil companies or not favoring. It's just looking at the big picture and how do we do this. And this is something that's going to be very important to the legislators who are going to be here over the next 10 years.
Just to continue this thought process a little bit, a question I have asked a few departing members, and it's something that's resonated and stuck with me over the years. Phil Eisenberg, the former assemblyman from Sacramento, the mayor of Sacramento, when he was termed out of the legislature back in the 90s, he told his colleagues in a goodbye ceremony one time, and it stuck with me all of these years. He said, legislators should only expect to have an impact on life and the work they do on the periphery, incrementally. Don't expect to come to Sacramento and cure cancer in your lifetime or fund every school fully or kick every welfare cheat off the rolls if that's your political philosophy. Do you agree with that? Do you have to be satisfied with incremental success, which you can look back after 10 years and see the changes, like you mentioned with school funding?
Absolutely. And, with climate change, everything we're going to do is incrementally. So I think his words were prophetic then, and they're prophetic now. Let's take wildfire, for example. We know in 2017, October 8th, I think I've said this on your podcast before, when I woke up that morning,
yes,
I had no idea that a lot of the body of my work here in the legislature would be all things wildfire, utility reform, utility caused wildfires. How do we try to solve that problem? We never spent really one dime on wildfire prevention, but yet we certainly spent $3 billion a year on wildfire suppression. Not that that's wrong, because we need to do that. But today we're spending $1 billion on prevention, and we didn't get there overnight. It was incremental, and Governor Brown started the ball rolling on that, and our leadership here in the Senate and the Assembly, and Governor Newsom's followed suit. And it's like, prescribed fire. All these bills that I've done, they're no silver bullet. And I think Phil Eisenberg's comments are really kind of tell the tale. In many cases, if you want to get a policy across, you've got to do it incrementally, because all of a sudden going and asking when we've done nothing in fire prevention, we want $1 billion and that's it. Well, you're never going to get there.
Well, and to your point, in the 4 or 5 years since those big fires on the coast in your district, Senator McGuire's district, a lot has changed. It didn't happen overnight, but if you go back to that 5 or 6 years to today, and even the massive wildfires we're having now as we speak, there has been change.
Absolutely. And it's not only my bills, it's my colleagues' bills on wildfire and different things in this area, on energy and utilities, on insurance. That incremental thing, it's really important. And I think oftentimes when we try to get the big bite at the apple, we find that we're either getting sued by the industry that say we can't take this, or there's a ballot initiative against what we've done, when if we had taken an incremental approach, we probably would have gotten to the same place nearly at the same time.
What are you most proud of in your legislative career? Water accessibility, economic sustainability, environmental safety. Where have you seen the most impact that you can walk away going, I am so proud that I was part of this discussion?
I think when I was elected chair of the conference committee on SB 901, that was my bill. It was the first and only conference committee. We used to have conference committees with our budgets.
Yes, all the time.
And everything. And it was the first conference committee that I had seen since I had been in the legislature. And I'm not sure we've had one since, but we got 5 assembly members and 5 senators together and met regularly and talked about the framework of what we're going to do with these wildfires. And that goes back to, I believe, 2018 when we were doing this. So we put the framework through to increase the budgets for wildfire prevention. How do we rebuild? How do we change the environmental rules to make sure that we can reduce the fuels that we have at our hillsides? And believe me, the environmental rules were put in place for good reason. But climate change wasn't around when these policies were put forward. And in today's environment, they just don't work. So we did a framework with that too. And so that was very, very satisfying. I got appointed by the pro tem at the time to be the chair of that. I think the things in AI that I've done recently, and before that to be one of the 3 partners, if you will, on the privacy, it's important. As I reflect back on privacy, we didn't do enough soon enough. There was no incremental work or no big bombastic type of bills to try to rein in the privacy issues with the tech companies, Facebook and Twitter and all those, and people's personal information. And I think we got there with the privacy bills, but we saw that we were a little late. And the privacy policy that we put forward is really working today. And so as I see AI, I see so many people complaining that we shouldn't regulate, that we're too early in the game. Look, I understand that we cannot thwart innovation. We are the leader in AI, and we need to let these companies do what they do best. But having guardrails to protect people, to protect people's information, to guard against discrimination and the laws of the state of California, look, we need to get going on that, and we're doing that right now, and I support it 100%. And I just know that we won't be late like we were in the privacy game, but I think we need to be flexible, that if we see that we have a problem, that's what legislative oversight is. Whoops, we're all human beings here. We're all human beings, all the legislators. Nobody's perfect. Governor's not perfect, the whole 9 yards. So let's pass the bills that we think are important, the policies that will make a difference. And if we see that we need to adjust, that's why we're a full-time legislature. We work every single year. We can adjust and make changes.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. And, you talk about specifics of your bills or successes with your bills. Earlier in the winter, we had our power out for most of a day, but I was able to still open my garage door because it had a battery. And I thought to myself, thank God to Bill Dodd for authoring the legislation a few years ago. So when you talk about legacy, every time I open my garage door,
so when you have a power outage and you're getting a cocktail to go because from a great local restaurant, you can open your garage door and receive that cocktail to go.
I could conceivably think of you and your Bill legacy at every aspect of my life. But seriously, I think about that and I remember thinking, what a great idea, you know, and I've got the power out till dinner time, but I can still get my car out of the garage because you had the foresight thinking all these people in these fires, power goes out in their neighborhoods. They can't get out of the garage. They can't get their vehicles out. What a great idea to mandate a garage door battery.
Right. As I had 500 and I think it was 36 of my neighbors' homes burned down in 2017. And one guy had to drive through his garage, back up through the garage door to get out. It was, late at night. And Congressman Mike Thompson, former senator in my district here, one of his staff people, Cheryl Deem over in Sonoma, couldn't get out. And she wasn't strong enough to be able to reach up and grab that and pull it. And she was the one that called me with the idea. And frankly, I tested it out at home with all my kids at the time, and it was needed.
Well, and kudos to you for it was your bill, but you're giving credit for the genesis of the idea to someone else. So that's great. And I know all politics is local, and you grew up in your district. Your district is your home, but your constituents all the way through your process have been your sustenance. They have been your priority, even with work that has more of a statewide impact here in Sacramento.
It's really incredible. First of all, I've got such a great district, 6 counties, 22 cities. So Napa, my hometown, I was born and raised there, raised my kids there, and now 11 of my 13 grandchildren are being raised right where I live. It is so unbelievable. And so it's a small town. It's 135,000 county population and 75,000 for the city of Napa. So in comparison to the 1 million people I serve, it's very, very small, but incredibly supportive. I have just been so blessed to have so many people in the political world, in the business world, in the nonprofit world. In essence, they know who I am. They, in a way, you could say many of them have trained me, over the years. And, as my dad used to say, hey, Bill, we gave you enough rope to hang yourself. Fortunately, you never did. That's why, because I was a business partner with my dad. And, he always said that I'm going to give you enough, rope, meaning I'm going to let you go out and do things.
Right. Make your mistakes. I've taught you everything I know, and now it's up to you to. Yeah,
it's up to you to get done. And, the whole idea of me, getting into this business in the first place stemmed from leaving a place better than you found it. And we used to go, my brothers and I, we used to go camping with my dad. And he was just a big stickler. It was time to break camp and everything. Clean up. And he'd say, what about all that over? Well, that was here before. Because I don't care if it's here before. You're going to leave this place in better condition than we got it, and that's going to make the next people happy. So, as we look at future generations, it's that analogy that's ingrained in my mind, whether it's public education, whether it's climate change, whether it's other environmental concerns, or a tax base for the future, making sure that we spend our tax dollars wisely and we're good stewards of the money for the people that are paying those taxes.
Right. As you're saying this, you're reminding me that all of our podcast chats in the past have been on specific subjects, fire, water, COVID, AI. And obviously we've touched on some of those too, but we really haven't talked a lot about you, Bill Dodd, and your past and your career. And yes, you can say everybody knows me. They know my story. But this legacy conversation, this exit interview, I want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, you were a farmer's son. You grew up on the ranch, right? Grew up on the farm. Did you want a career in ag? Was that how you foresaw yourself?
No, I mean, it was a small family farm. We had acreage of, walnuts and a few acres of grapes. But let me tell you, picking and doing ag work, I have so much respect for farm workers. Because we didn't have farm workers in those days. I mean, frankly, it was on a small farm. We had 5 boys and maybe a little bit of help. But let me tell you, it's backbreaking work. And so I have great, great respect. But no, that business really was not, we had animals, horses, sheep, and otherwise. But it was an experiential, not a real business.
Sure.
So the business was the water business that my dad, had, that I went into business.
Right. You did that right after college
Right.
at Chico State.
Yeah, Chico
Yes.
State. And then I went into the family business and was very fortunate. And, you'll always hear me say we, because by the time I got in, we had something like 6 employees. When I left and sold the business, we had over 40 employees and really grew that business. But let me tell you, just like here, I already talked to you about, I couldn't do it without great people working with me every single day. It's the same type of situation in private business. I was very successful, but I wouldn't be half as successful if I hadn't had incredibly good employees. And it's the same type of thing. I was able to attract employees and keep them because I listened to them. I think that's also the key to not getting in trouble. General Patton once said, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody's not thinking. And, when I get into a room, either with my staff here or when I was in business and everyone was thinking alike, that always kind of worried me. And when I was, sometimes you worry about, because you're the boss, everybody's just, yeah, boss, yeah, boss, yeah, boss. You want people to say, no, I don't agree with that. And you need sometimes to be strong and listen to them and take other people's advice.
Absolutely. Well, one could even presume that you wouldn't have been as effective legislator as you were if you hadn't been a small businessman, if you hadn't been a leader in water politics and water regulation over the years, not only with a Culligan franchise, but also your work statewide. And then you brought that to the Board of Supervisors in Napa, and then you come to Sacramento. How did I can see the connection between being a small businessman and working in water, going to politics, going to the legislature, but how did you make that? Why did you decide to run?
Well, first of all, I think you're right. I think that my ability to do the work I have here was predicated on the experience over the years in a number of different endeavors. When I sold the business, we successfully sold that in 1998. I had a 5-year contract with the company to continue to run it and expand business on the West Coast. But there was something else. And I think it was also, from my mom and dad, always giving back to the community. I had been successful, and so money really wasn't the big objective in my life. So what is the meaning of my life? How can I make this place a better place? And I saw that it wasn't an open seat. There was an incumbent running on the Board of Supervisors and 2 people running at the time, and then I was the third person that got in the race and ran, I think, a textbook campaign and won. And it was very difficult at the beginning because we all have our impressions and biases about really what government does or what they don't do.
Right.
In some cases. And I got to tell you, I come away, when I think about my time at Napa County and I think of my time in the state of California, nothing could be further from the truth in terms of people's misconceptions of public workers. I have been so impressed on the county level and on the state level, the commitment, not only of my staff, but of the entire Senate staff and the Assembly staff when I was there. We're one team, one fight here. And it may not seem like that all the time, but I've been very, very impressed with the leadership and how they've handled that over the years.
I mean, that's great that your attitude has been that, and the appreciation,
and particularly in the media department,
yeah.
Brian, too, and you and all your team.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We're a big family. We're working together.
Yeah.
Who were some of your mentors over the years? Who did you learn from? Obviously, your dad. But
my dad was number one.
Yes. Who did you
doubt.
model your approach with over the years? Even if it was somebody you didn't meet, but just somebody whose legacy, whose life you said, it wouldn't hurt me to model myself after that person.
I don't think it's one person that modeled. I was always a joiner. I joined the Chamber of Commerce. I joined the trade associations. I was president of our statewide trade association in the water business and national and international trade associations in the water business.
Right.
And so I always had that feeling that if I surrounded myself with successful people all around, that I would learn more about what they do to become successful. So while I'm not going to give credit to any one person or anything, it's just in general my feeling that it was important. If I wanted to be successful, I didn't necessarily need to recreate the wheel. The wheel's already created out there. There's a lot of successful people, and listening to those people and asking questions, I think that really served me well over the years, in the water industry. And then here in the Capitol, well, I don't really have all that many role models. I have a lot of friends.
That's just as important.
On both sides of the aisle that I just incredibly respect. I've been fortunate to work under two great governors. I think Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, they both become friends. The leadership all the way through, and Anthony Rendon when I was in the assembly and here. And then I get, the woman that was my leader as the speaker coming
Tony
over
Atkins.
here, being the president pro tem. And then to be involved in, Senator Pro Tem McGuire's campaign to become the pro tem was a high point in my career here. I absolutely loved helping him. I think he's doing a fabulous job, and we're only beginning to see the results of his talents in the California State Senate.
Senator McGuire, if you're listening, and I think he does listen to these, you're getting endorsements.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, closer to home, you and your wife, Mary, longtime marriage, you have 5 kids and 13 grandchildren. Wow. They're the love of your life, I assume, right?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And let me just say, it is hard on the spouse being in this business.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, even though you drive to and from work most days, doing to and from home to Sacramento, it's still hard.
But that was a compromise too. And that's what you have to do because, and then I feel really bad. A lot of these young people that got kids at home and everything flying back are here 3 or 4 days without their families,
right.
and their families are without them, whether it's the mother or the father, because guess what? We're almost at parity,
yes.
which is another thing I think we can be proud of here, that we have almost as many women as we do men. But it does take a toll on the family because not only are you away from home every single day, but when you get home, you just absolutely have to be going to these events because this is what it's all about, is communicating with your district. And as I said before, I have 6 counties, 22 cities. That's a lot of driving around because, there are crab feeds in all those 22 cities.
Right.
And nevertheless, my kids were young. I mean, early on when I was in the county, at least I was home. But when you come to Sacramento, there's more responsibility, more time away. And I just really love my wife and appreciate the fact that she has supported me all these years, 25 years. And I think that's amazing. And I'm proud of her and how she has handled everything. And when I've not been there, to carry on our family traditions.
And I'm sure, I can only imagine that they're proud of you in the back end of this here as you end your career and the respect you have in the community, the respect you have in the state. Not to say that makes it worth those nights you weren't home, but it's just to say, that's my dad, that's my husband, that's my grandpa.
I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know how many days I've been in the Capitol in 10 years, but it's a lot of days.
Yes.
If I could pick one day that was the most favorite day, was 2 months ago, I had Mary, my wife, all 5 of my kids, their spouses, and 13 grandchildren on the Senate floor. And,
wow.
And, Mary coordinated the colors that they were all wearing and everything. So it was pretty awesome. I was so incredibly proud.
That's wonderful.
And to look out at my colleagues that were turning around, listening to me as I introduced them all, and the smiles on all their faces. I tell you, it was my favorite day. I'm a crier, and it really makes me emotional just to even think.
That's wonderful. What a nice way to gift wrap an exceptional career and a relationship with your family.
And the kids and grandkids some of the grandkids finally got what I did. I don't think they even.
That's right.
I don't even think they had any conception, but most recently had a little vacation during the break, and Papa, that was so much fun. To go to the Senate, to go to the Capitol. So it was really cool.
Well, Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas morning in your living room must be a real adventure.
It is an adventure, but it's very, very cool. And I'm looking forward to spending more time with all of them for sure.
Well, as we wrap up, just a couple more questions. We have talked a lot about wildfire. We've talked about AI and privacy and some other issues that have been close to home and close to policy for you. In your district, we're getting close to harvest time. And I know it's a wonderful time for the entire district because it's the wine community for California. Napa's world-renowned. The wine industry, though, in California, not just in your district, but in other parts of the state, they've been these economically driven tourist incentives, but always susceptible to climate impact, to pestilence, to fire, economic downturn. But it's always sustained and thrived and been very competitive with the wine industry of the rest of the world. But it's now starting to seem like, if you read the headlines of late, that California's $55 billion-dollar wine industries having some pains. People's drinking habits have changed. Climate change obviously has had an effect. What's your take on the wine industry and a community that's integral to, and a product and an economic base that's integral to not only just this part of the state, but the rest of the world, the rest of the country?
Well, the wine industry is resilient. There's big investment in the wine industry. There's a great connection with University of California at Davis.
Right.
And they're working
their viticulture program is
their
fantastic.
viticulture program. They're working on different clones and rootstock that's going to be more drought resistant, that will be more climatic condition resistant. And even they're doing studies that we've helped finance here in the legislature on smoke taint, what to do there. In 2020, Napa County lost almost 100% of its Cabernet Sauvignon vintage. That's unprecedented. And so at the same time, and this isn't just a Napa issue, I've been just so fortunate to co-chair the Senate Select Committee on Wine with Senator McGuire, who's got another great wine region, over to the west of us in Sonoma County and Mendocino and in Clarksburg and Amador and El Dorado and down to Temecula. And, oh, my gosh, the Central Coast is making some fabulous wine. So California is really a great position, but they're challenged right now because you brought it up, the drinking habits. And a lot of these kids moving up are drinking, not drinking, could be, or drinking hard liquor or beer. But in that space, those hard liquor, kind of ready to drink cocktails type are really thriving right now. And wines, I think wines on the low level are still, fairly stable, but challenged. The high-end wines, there's always going to be a market for that. But as the baby boomers age out, who knows what's going to happen. But I have confidence that, markets change, they'll adapt, and they'll figure it out. But there'll probably be more consolidation, smaller wineries selling out. We've had a lot of that in Napa County, to be sure.
You have had your finger on the pulse of all of this for a long time now, not just being part of your district and from your district, but representing it in the legislature and even in local government. You going to miss it? You're going to miss having your finger on the pulse of all of this on a legislative level anyway? On
a legislative level, there's no doubt I'm going to miss it. If you love what you do and then you leave, you do miss it, but you have transitions. Look, I never wanted to leave college, although I graduated 4 years, and I had my pulse on what was going on at Chico State. Well, you know what? You got to leave. There's that moment. And when I left business, it was the same thing. I missed it and got into politics. I was really unsure. Should I go to the state level? I missed Napa County, but here I am. Of course I'm going to miss it because I loved what I do. I love working with people. Certainly there are things that I don't love about it, but get over it. You got people that you represent, and that was where my eyes was always on the ball. There's no doubt I'll miss it, but I'm going to stay close. I'm not going to micromanage the new senator from District 3. My work will be, in other areas, of government, perhaps consulting a bit.
Since you brought it up, that was one of my questions. What do you want to do? What's ahead for you?
I'm not ready to fully retire. I just think that I need to. I've got a lot of information, a lot of things. This wildfire area, emergency services, those things are incredibly important. How we address our grid. We know that we're going to an all-electric society and everything as we move forward. We have to make sure that we do the work that we need to do for our grid. There's still a lot of issues, and I think there's plenty of opportunities to be able to keep an oar in the water, so to speak, and work towards policy that I'd like to see move forward.
Keeping in mind everything you've said, what is some of your advice for those that are standing on your shoulders? You've talked about this to some degree, but just big picture to lawmakers coming in, younger or older, maybe have local government experience, but likely no ledge experience. What do you say to them? How can they make it work a la Bill Dodd?
I hate to keep bringing my dad up in this thing, but my dad said, for crying out loud, Bill, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Would you use them in that proportion, please? And that's what I would say to a lot of these people. Listen, because you're going to learn a lot more by listening to people. We all think we're the smartest one in the room, but rarely is that the case. All we can do is get better and smarter by listening more to both sides of the equation. And that's what's wrong, I think, so often. For example, in Washington, D.C., it's a disaster. We all know that. Nobody's listening to anybody. It's the echo chambers. Everybody's mind is all made up. At least here in California, we have a fighting chance. People are listening. But for the new people coming in, to fully answer your question, it's listen, learn, then maybe speak.
Well said. You mentioned Washington, D.C. Just as a final question, as we invest in the future, you have a lot of past behind you, but you're obviously still looking to the future. I'm not at liberty to talk too much about politics and elections on this podcast, so I'll craft this question in a broader way. Our country is on the threshold of really some exceptional change very soon, either some historic change long sought after, dreamed of, aspirational achievement on civil rights and equality, that we've come to this threshold just so quickly, just even in the next few months. So we have that ahead of us. Or we could find ourselves devolving as a country, as a democracy, also so quickly. And everything that we fought for and died for could just vanish in the mist. It's all on the precipice in a way that I've not seen in my lifetime and likely in yours. What's your perspective on what's ahead for this country as a dad, as a grandpa, a man going into his third or fourth active life here, a tenured lawmaker? What is ahead of us here for this country?
Well, first, I would say that I totally support your premise and how you've led into this question. This is the most important election in my lifetime.
And we've heard that many times, but it just feels like, no, this one really is.
And I intend to be involved. We don't need to get into specifics, but I intend to be involved in a manner that I have never participated in a national election, in my life. I think it's that important for me, for my kids, for my grandkids. Everybody's got family members that have a political persuasion that's different than yours, may not agree with me. But as we move forward, what we have now is we have proof. We have proof of what can happen. But I have hope. I'm an optimist. And, if you've read Washington's farewell address and the whole history around there, we've had problems like this in the maybe not exactly like this, but those are part of the concerns that George Washington had: hyper-partisanship, getting involved in other countries' affairs, too high of taxes. I mean, just a number of things that over time.
And a national leader willing to step aside for the betterment of the country. Yeah.
I just think that parallel is pretty darn good right there.
Yeah.
Biden to Washington. I mean, look at it. He's not the father of our country or anything like that. But my God, to make a decision like that for his country says a lot about the man. But I am hopeful. I do believe that we've been through serious situations in this country before, and our democracy, if we do the things that we know that are right, I'm optimistic. But just like anything else, if you don't work hard for it, it's not as easy. It won't come as easy. So we need to work hard and make sure that our democracy prevails in this great country. Because when you compare this country and this state to any other country in the world, we've got it pretty darn good. And we just need national leaders that are willing to start listening. Let's get back to that. Listen.
I am going to miss these podcasts with you a couple of times a year. Thank you for your being so candid and just so honest and sharing what you've shared. And I wish you luck with everything, including the next couple of weeks with your bills ahead, but whatever's ahead for you. So I hope our paths can cross again. Really,
Brian, thanks a lot. It's very meaningful, and this is so much fun for me, and you do great work for the entire Senate caucus.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been fun for me, and thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
State Senator Bill Dodd of Napa, representing California's 3rd Senate District, Napa Valley and the environs nearby. He is the chair of the Senate Committee on Governmental Organization. And that brings us to a close of this edition of Then There's California. We are a production of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus with technical and production assistance from Nick Boulay, Brian Shadden, John Roman, Leroy Hamer, McLeana Woods, Maya Velasquez, and the graphic artistry of Tim Davis. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. Thanks for listening to Then There's California.